Hey Vicky, Grant Putnam here about 9 o'clock Sunday morning. Just wanted to quickly go through the maintenance proposal for this spring. Okay, so weekly mowing, we vacuum the clippings. So we get haul the clippings off the property versus cut the clippings and leave clumps over the lawn. Now you have an irrigation system, so the grass is going to grow twice as fast. So if you cut the lawn and disperse the clippings like 90% of lawn mowing companies do, it's going to leave little clumps over the lawn, and those clumps will then kill the grass underneath it. So most of our clients have an irrigation system, hence we have vacuums in the back of our mowers that collect the clippings. It costs a little bit more, but this way you get a much better result. And these are the other reasons, obviously, why listed on the proposal, why it's just a better way to do it. Okay. Spring cleanup, pretty straightforward. Fall cleanup, every time we cut the lawn, we're collecting the clippings. Collecting the leaves, or blowing the leaves rather to the corners of the property, and then we usually actually collect them at the very end of the season. So we keep the leaves off the lawn every time we cut the lawn, but then we do a thorough cleanup of like the mulch beds at the very end of the season. Okay, so now one thing I would mention is if you're really happy with your current lawn provider and they might be cheaper than us because perhaps they're a smaller company, and most of the smaller companies aren't paying payroll taxes, so they're paying their guys in cash, and most of the smaller companies aren't having to pay workers' comp. So there's, so if we're playing by the rules again, we might be a tad more expensive, plus we're vacuuming the clippings. So if you are really happy with the current provider who's doing the very basic services, which is the ones we just went over, then by all means we could leave them in place, let them do the basic services, then we could do everything outside of the basic services. All right, and I'd say about a decent amount of clients end up doing that. So just a thought. Now the flip side of thing is the advantage of us being there weekly. It gives you more security and more of an insurance policy on the health of everything. So for example, if you get a lawn disease or the plants are getting overwatered, underwatered, then the higher frequency in the property just allows us to look at it more constantly and then avoid some of those bigger issues. So that's the plus side of kind of using an all-in-one service company. Okay. Let's see here. Shrub trimming, weeding. I left that as an hourly charge. I usually do that for the first year when we take over a client, because we don't know exactly how long it's going to take to weed 6 times during the season. So we weed every month, and then we typically trim the plants that are supposed to be trimmed that month. So for example, we would trim some plants now that are supposed to be trimmed right after the winter. So the first gardening visit is actually now. And then we end up doing, again, 5 more gardening visits throughout the summer and fall. Each plant has a different characteristics in regards to when it's supposed to be trimmed, so that's why it's important to kind of spread out the visits. And then some plants, like the boxwoods, for example, you're trimming those twice a season so that they keep their dense growth habit. So that's real important. That's, unless you're a landscape designer and build a company, then most of the time the average lawn cutting company doesn't even know the names of the plants nor how to properly take care of them. So anyways, that's what's going on with that. Okay. Spring mulching, you're not gonna have to worry about that this year. The following year you will. You got to replace about an inch and a half every year because it decomposes. All right, so that's applicable in 2020. Deer rabbit spray. So just because you have a fenced-in backyard doesn't mean a lot of those little perennials might not get eaten from rabbits. So and remember, they can always jump over a 5-6 foot fence pretty easily. Those emerald green arborvitaes, which are the ones we have along the left side of your property, are like deer candy. So I would still spray if I was you, or you can spray yourself. I can explain where to buy the material and where to get a backpack sprayer, but I would suggest doing that so you avoid a major disappointment if stuff gets eaten. Okay. Boxwoods, once you put in these larger boxwoods, if you get a heavy snow, they'll kind of flatten and destroy the boxwoods. So I would tie them
prior to winter, so that's what that is, preventing winter damage. And then I would also make sure that whoever's plowing the driveway, part of their scope of work is knocking the snow off your boxwoods when they visit to do the snow cleanup, okay? But tying them is important. Let's see here. These are a bunch of optional services. You can read through that. Plant tree health care. The boxwoods are very susceptible to something called leaf miner insect. So the way you treat that is you systemically treat it. It means you pump fertilizer / imidacloprid, which is a type of chemical that is consumed by the boxwood and prevents the leaf miners from attacking. And that's, again, super common. I'd say the most common issue I see on people's properties. So that's that treatment. Summer, fall horticulture oil and fall horticulture oil. It's basically the most environmentally friendly way to smother any insect populations on your shrubs. So there's all these little insects that will start eating your shrubs and damaging the plants, and that's what is used as far as a very safe method to be able to combat that. Now, that being said, there's also something called Japanese beetle, and Japanese beetles derive from grubs. So the grubs could be as much a mile away, so any lawn that doesn't treat for grubs turns into a Japanese beetle. They fly around and they eat the soft tissue of the plant. This won't prevent that. So it's not preventative. It's more of like, okay, what's ever on the plant, you're killing it. And all those little bugs you don't see. Japanese beetles, the only way you could try to prevent that is you have to spray it every single week. So really no one does that. But I want to point that out as something that is a potential aesthetic issue that you might notice during the summer. Okay. Then there's fall deep root feeding. So same concept. We use a deep root needle connected to a high pressure hose connected to a big tank truck. And then we pump fertilizer about every 3 feet into the root zones for your whole property of all your plants and trees. So it's just a super beneficial way to give the plants the nutrients that they need. All right, and then as an optional service, I included spring granular fertilizer for all the shrubs. I think that's a good idea, so you get the most out of your plants. All right, so that's your plant and tree healthcare items. Tick spray. We're using different equipment than the average guy. So if you read this in blue, because we're using more expensive, higher pressure equipment, we're getting better coverage. So if you look for tick spray, that's what's going on with that. Irrigation service, you got your opening, your winterizing, so your opening, closing, and then your seasonal adjustments. So we have to make multiple seasonal adjustments during the season. And we recommend that we only really touch the irrigation because most clients aren't going to understand the symptoms of overwatering, underwatering. But that's what that is. Okay. Lawn health care. So we try to use the most safe products. We're ending up doing 2 pre-emergent controls. Okay, we're using something that has an extended nitrogen release, so it doesn't. The plant has nutrients available over a much longer period of time. It's more expensive, but your lawn looks way, way better. So we're basically using the best technology, the most expensive materials, which then results in a much better looking lawn. So then we have the 2 spring, again, pre-emergent fertilizers. We spot spray the weeds during every visit. A lot of the big companies, they only broadcast spray, like with a huge spray wand, and just bad idea because you're spraying too many chemicals in a lawn. You're actually hurting the lawn itself because those herbicides, they work as a growth inhibitor. They're not like a Roundup that kills in 3 days. It takes like 3 weeks to kill a weed. But if you're spraying the whole lawn, then obviously you're in a much worse situation than if you're just spot spraying individual weeds. Okay, so that's what we do every visit. We spot spray every weed. Then you've got early summer fertilizer, early summer grub control, midsummer insect control. If we're doing the tick spray in the property, it's a reduced price for the midsummer because we can do it at the same time. Okay, so that's something to point out. Early fall fertilizer in combination with also your core area and seeding. Core area and seeding is super important. That's basically gonna fix any imperfections in the lawn and thicken up your lawn for the following season. So that service is super important, and that will basically determine how your lawn looks the following year. Okay. Then you've got your lime application in the fall, and then the late fall winterizer. The late fall winterizer is probably the least most important, but again, it does make a difference. Spring seeding, again, is optional based on if you need it or not. Okay, if you have shady areas in your property that need it. So right now your total was about $7,400 plus tax, plus any of the time you spent trimming and pulling weeds. All right, so that's it. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.